The night my husband left me in the rain was the night I learned how little I was worth to him. The rain hit so hard it stung my skin, soaking through the silk of my navy evening gown in seconds, the cold seeping down to my bones as the valet staff pretended not to see me standing barefoot on Madison Avenue. My heel had snapped when I tried to follow Daniel, the thin strap giving up the same way my marriage just had. He didn't shout. He didn't argue. He just looked at me with quiet irritation after I corrected him at dinner, after I refused to laugh at a joke made at my expense, and said, "You embarrassed me." Then he got into his $120,000 Mercedes, shut the door, and drove away like I was a coat he forgot to grab. I remember the sound more than anything, the solid click of the lock, the smooth engine fading into the wet Manhattan night. I stood there for a full minute, rain running down my face, mixing with mascara and something hotter I refused to call tears. People in tailored suits stepped around me. A couple rushed past under a shared umbrella. No one stopped. I wrapped my arms around myself, not because I was fragile, but because I was cold, because I felt erased. The hotel lights reflected off the puddles at my feet, turning the street into a warped mirror, and in it I barely recognized the woman staring back at me. 30 years old, master's degree, charity board member, wife of a rising financial executive, and still somehow nothing. That's when the headlights cut through the rain. Slow, deliberate. A black Escalade pulled to the curb inches from where I stood. Not flashy, not loud, just powerful in the way it occupied space like it owned it. The engine didn't rev. It purred. The tinted back window slid down halfway, revealing a man I had noticed earlier inside the ballroom, but had been careful not to look at for too long. Adrian Moretti, 6'2", maybe 6'3", dark hair slicked back, gray eyes steady and unreadable. He had watched the room the way other men watch stock tickers, calculating, patient. And apparently, he had watched me. He stepped out into the rain without hesitation, his tailored charcoal coat darkening instantly under the downpour. No umbrella. No rush. He closed the distance between us in a few measured steps, his shoes splashing through water that soaked my bare feet. He didn't look angry. He didn't look sympathetic. He looked certain. "Do you always let men leave you in the rain?" he asked quietly. His voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the storm like it had authority over it. I swallowed, lifting my chin even though my hands were shaking. "I'm fine." The lie tasted bitter. His gaze moved from my broken heel to my trembling shoulders, to the hotel entrance where Daniel had disappeared minutes earlier. Something shifted in his expression, not pity, disapproval, not of me, of the situation. He removed his coat and placed it over my shoulders with controlled precision, the fabric heavy and warm against my soaked skin. "You're not fine," he said calmly. And he just made the most expensive mistake of his life. Then he opened the passenger door of the Escalade and held it there, rain sliding down his jaw, eyes never leaving mine. "Get in." I should have walked away. That is what pride would have done. But pride does not keep you warm at 42 degrees in a silk dress that now clung to your skin like regret. I stood there for 3 heartbeats, staring at the open passenger door, rain pooling at my feet, his coat heavy around my shoulders. No one had ever stepped into a storm for me before, not even my husband. Especially not my husband. The inside of the Escalade glowed with soft amber light, leather seats untouched by chaos, the faint scent of cedar and something darker, controlled. Safe. I hated that word. Safe had always meant controlled in my marriage. Do not speak unless asked. Do not disagree in public. Do not outshine. I lifted my chin and met Adrian Moretti's eyes. "Why do you care?" I asked, because that mattered more than warmth. He did not hesitate. "I do not," he said evenly. "I care about disrespect." The distinction landed somewhere deep in my chest. He was not rescuing me because I was fragile. He was offended because someone had treated me as disposable. There is a difference. I slid into the passenger seat before I could talk myself out of it. The door closed with a solid, final sound that felt nothing like being locked in. It felt like being sealed off from the noise outside. The rain softened against the glass. The city blurred into streaks of white and gold as the driver pulled away from the curb. I kept my hands folded in my lap, fingers trembling less now, aware of him beside me, aware of the silence that did not feel awkward. It felt deliberate. "Where are we going?" I asked. "Somewhere dry," he replied. A pause. "And somewhere he cannot reach you tonight." My laugh was small and bitter. He is my husband. He can reach me anywhere. Adrian turned his head slightly, studying me as if I were a contract he intended to rewrite. That depends, he said calmly, on who is standing in front of him. The implication was quiet but undeniable. Power does not shout. It states. I looked out the window at the familiar skyline, wondering how many decisions I had swallowed over the past 5 years to keep peace. I remembered the first time Daniel corrected the way I spoke at a dinner party. The first time he suggested I stop working because his income was enough. The first time I apologized when I had done nothing wrong. Each memory felt smaller now, almost foolish. You watched, I said softly, realization settling in. Inside the ballroom. You saw what happened. Yes. No apology. No denial. Why did you not intervene then? His jaw tightened slightly. Because I needed to see if you would stand up on your own. The words startled me more than anything else that night. He had not rushed in. He had waited. Not to test my weakness. To measure my strength. The car turned onto a quieter street lined with brownstones and iron gates. My pulse quickened again, but not from fear. From awareness. My life had shifted in the span of 10 minutes. My husband drove away thinking he had taught me a lesson. He had. Just not the one he intended. Adrian's voice broke through my thoughts. Tell me, he said quietly. Does he always leave you out in the cold? I stared at my reflection in the dark glass, at the woman wrapped in another man's coat, and for the first time in years, I did not rush to defend him. No, I answered honestly. Usually it is worse. Usually he leaves me invisible. The corner of Adrian's mouth moved. Not. A smile, not quite. I do not tolerate invisible, he said. And somehow, I believed him. The car slowed behind a wrought iron gate that opened without a single word being spoken, and I felt the shift again, that quiet reminder that Adrian did not exist in the same world as most men. The brownstone ahead was not flashy or loud. It was controlled. Clean lines. Tall windows glowing with warm light. The kind of place that did not need to prove anything. The Escalade came to a smooth stop beneath a covered entryway, shielding us from the rain that still poured down in steady sheets. For a moment, neither of us moved. I became aware of how small I felt in the oversized coat around my shoulders and how steady he remained beside me, as if nights like this were routine. He stepped out first and walked around the front of the vehicle. When he opened my door, he offered his hand, not to pull me out, but to steady me. I hesitated only a second before placing my fingers in his. His grip was warm, firm, deliberate, not possessive, not careless. Inside, the air felt different. Quiet. The kind of quiet that comes from thick walls and people who understand discretion. A woman in her 40s appeared from a hallway, dressed simply, her expression calm. She did not look surprised to see me. She looked prepared. Adrian removed his coat from my shoulders and handed it to her. Dry clothes, he said gently. Not a command. A decision. She nodded and motioned for me to follow. I should have protested. I should have asked more questions. Instead, I let myself be led upstairs, my bare feet silent against polished hardwood floors. The bathroom I stepped into was larger than my entire apartment kitchen. Soft white towels. A rain shower that echoed the storm outside, but controlled. I stood in front of the mirror for a long time before turning the water on. My mascara had streaked down my cheeks. My hair clung to my face. I looked exhausted. Not from tonight. From years of trying to be smaller than I was. When I stepped out wrapped in a robe, the woman had left a simple sweater and leggings folded neatly on the counter. They fit as if someone had guessed correctly. Or planned. Downstairs, Adrian stood near a fireplace, one hand resting on the mantel, his suit jacket removed, sleeves rolled neatly to his forearms. He looked up when I entered, his gaze sweeping over me not in evaluation, but in assessment. Better, he said quietly. I nodded, unsure what to do with my hands, with the space between us. A glass of water waited on the coffee table. I took it, realizing how thirsty I was. He did not ask if I wanted wine. He did not assume I needed distraction. He assumed I needed clarity. He works with men who answer to me, Adrian said after a moment, his voice even. The statement settled heavily in the room. My fingers tightened around the glass. Daniel does not know that, I said carefully. He thinks he is independent. Adrian's expression did not change. Most men who borrow influence believe they are powerful. A slow realization began forming, sharp and undeniable. You could ruin him, I whispered. He held my gaze steadily. That depends on what you want. The question hung between us, far more dangerous than any raised voice. What did I want? Not what Daniel expected. Not what society would advise. Me. For years I had adjusted myself to fit someone else's ambition. Tonight, standing in borrowed clothes inside a house guarded by quiet authority, I felt something unfamiliar rise in my chest. Choice. Adrian stepped closer, not invading, simply closing the distance enough to be heard without effort. I do not take what is not freely given, he said calmly. But I do correct what is disrespectful. The firelight flickered against his features, softening nothing. Strength does not require volume. I met his eyes without lowering mine. For the first time in a long time, I did not feel invisible. I felt seen, and that frightened me more than the rain ever could. Silence can be louder than shouting, and the silence in that room pressed against my ribs harder than any argument ever had. I stood there in borrowed clothes, holding a glass of water I had not tasted again, and realized that for the first time in years no one was telling me what I should feel. Adrian waited. He did not pace. He did not fill the space with persuasion. He simply watched me as if my answer mattered. Outside, the rain continued to fall against the tall windows, softer now, steadier. Like the storm had decided to listen too. If you ruin him, I said slowly, choosing each word, it will look like I ran to another man for protection. Adrian's expression did not flicker. Did you? The question was direct, not accusatory. I thought about it. About the moment I stepped into the Escalade. About the warmth of his coat. About the way he had asked me what I wanted instead of telling me what I deserved. No, I answered honestly. I got into your car because I was cold. Not because I am helpless. A faint nod. Approval, maybe. Or acknowledgement. Good, he said. Helpless does not interest me. The words should have offended me. Instead, they steadied me. I moved closer to the fire, feeling the heat against my palms, letting it dry the last chill from my skin. Daniel will call, I said. He will apologize. He will say he was stressed, that I overreacted, that we both made mistakes. I had rehearsed that script before. Adrian walked to a small table near the window where his phone rested. The screen lit up at that exact moment, vibrating once against the wood. He did not need to check the name. He already knew. On schedule, he murmured. He turned the phone so I could see it. Daniel's name glowed across the display. 6 missed calls. 3 new messages. The timing made my stomach twist. Not because I missed him. Because I recognized the pattern. Apology when control slips. Charm when authority is questioned. Adrian silenced the phone without answering. You decide, he said quietly. If you want to speak to him, you will. If you do not, he will wait. I stared at the screen, at the man I had once believed would protect me, now scrambling because I had stepped outside the narrative he preferred. He will be angry, I whispered. Adrian's gaze hardened slightly, not toward me, but toward the idea. Anger is loud, he said. It is rarely powerful. I felt something inside me shift again. Not dependence. Not fear. Clarity. What happens if I choose myself? I asked. The question felt dangerous and freeing all at once. Adrian stepped closer, close enough that I could see the faint silver at his temples in the firelight. Then everything changes, he replied. For you. And for him. No threats. No dramatic promises. Just certainty. My phone buzzed in my pocket this time, sharp and insistent. I took it out slowly. Another message from Daniel. I opened it. Where are you? Do not embarrass me further. Come home. The words were not concern. They were command. I looked up at Adrian, at the man who had stepped into the rain without hesitation but refused to decide my future for me. For years I had confused intensity with strength. Tonight, I understood the difference. Strength waits. Strength offers choice. My thumb hovered over the screen. Then I typed 3 words I had never dared to send before. I am not coming. I did not block him. I did not explain. I pressed send and felt my pulse steady instead of spike. The message delivered. Read almost instantly. The phone began ringing again. I turned it face down on the table beside Adrian's. He studied me for a long moment, something unreadable passing through his eyes. Not triumph. Respect. Good, he said softly. And in that single word, I felt the beginning of something I had not felt in a very long time. Not rescue. Not rebellion. Power. The ringing stopped after the 3rd attempt, and the silence that followed felt different this time. Not tense. Not fragile. Decided. I kept my phone face down on the table, resisting the instinct to flip it over, to check, to explain myself further. For years I had rushed to smooth things over before they even broke. Tonight, I let the fracture stand. Adrian moved toward the bar against the far wall and poured sparkling water into a clean glass, sliding it toward me without asking if I wanted anything stronger. I noticed that. He did not assume I needed to be dulled. He assumed I needed to be clear. He will escalate, I said quietly, more to myself than to him. Adrian leaned one shoulder against the counter, composed as ever. He will try, he corrected gently. There was something unsettling about how calm he remained. Not detached. In control. You said he works with men who answer to you. I pressed. What exactly does that mean? Adrian held my gaze, weighing how much to say. It means, he replied evenly, that the contracts he is celebrating tonight only exist because I allowed them to. The statement was not arrogant. It was factual. I felt the weight of that truth settle in my stomach. Daniel had strutted through the ballroom like a self-made success, shaking hands, making promises, speaking about expansion plans as if he owned the future. And all along, someone else had been holding the foundation steady beneath him. If you pull that support, I said slowly, his world collapses. Adrian did not smile. Support can be adjusted, he said. Standards can be enforced. I understood what he was telling me without him needing to spell it out. No threats. No dramatic retaliation. Just consequences. The kind that show up in boardrooms and bank statements, not in raised voices. My phone buzzed again, but this time it was a different tone. An email notification. I hesitated before turning it over. A message from one of Daniel's colleagues. Subject line, urgent. My pulse ticked up as I opened it. The wording was careful, corporate, almost polite. Due to unforeseen compliance concerns, tomorrow's contract signing would be postponed pending review. I read it twice. Then a third time. My hands did not shake. It has already started, I murmured. Adrian did not move closer. He did not reach for my phone. He simply watched me process it. I did not do that, he said quietly. Not yet. The distinction mattered. If this was not him, then it was something else. Or someone else. A thread pulling loose. You were telling me his position was never as stable as he pretended, I said. Adrian inclined his head once. Men who need to diminish their wives often need to exaggerate their power. The truth of that stung more than the rain had earlier. I thought about every time Daniel had corrected my opinions in public. Every time he had reminded me whose name was on the investment accounts. Every time he had framed my success as a reflection of his generosity. The illusion was cracking, and I was not the one breaking. If I stay here tonight, I said carefully, I do not want to trade one form of control for another. Adrian pushed away from the counter and closed the distance between us, stopping a respectful foot away. Then do not, he answered simply. You are here because you chose to step into my car. You will leave if you choose to walk out that door. The difference is that no one will leave you standing in the rain again. The promise was not possessive. It was protective. There was strength in that. Not dominance. Assurance. I studied him in the firelight, searching for the hidden expectation, the condition, the silent contract. I did not find one. And if I decide to end my marriage? I asked. His eyes did not waver. Then you will do it because you deserve respect, he said. Not because I am standing here. I exhaled slowly, feeling something settle into place inside me. Not dependence. Not defiance. Direction. For the first time in years, the future did not look like a narrow hallway I was being pushed down. It looked like an open door. And this time, I was the one deciding whether to walk through it. Power does not arrive with fireworks. It settles quietly into your spine and changes the way you breathe. I felt it that night, standing in front of a man who could dismantle my husband's career with a phone call, yet refused to move a single piece without my permission. The fire had burned lower, casting long shadows across the room, and for the first time the storm outside had faded into a distant whisper. My phone remained face down between us, no longer buzzing, no longer demanding my immediate attention. That alone felt revolutionary. I walked toward the tall window overlooking the dark street below, folding my arms loosely, not defensively, but thoughtfully. If I leave him, I said quietly, watching my reflection in the glass, he will tell everyone I was unstable, emotional, ungrateful. The words tasted familiar. They were the same ones he had used before, just softened for public consumption. Adrian joined me near the window, but did not stand too close. Men who build their image on control rarely admit they lost it, he said evenly. They rewrite the story. I turned to face him. And what would your version be? He held my gaze without hesitation. That you chose dignity. The simplicity of it startled me. No embellishment. No drama. Just dignity. I let that settle in my chest. For years I had confused endurance with loyalty. I had believed that staying quiet was strength, that absorbing criticism was maturity. But dignity was different. Dignity required boundaries. If I walk out that door tonight, I asked carefully, will you interfere? The question mattered. Adrian's answer mattered even more. Only if someone attempts. To harm your freedom, he replied. Not your pride. Not your choices. Your freedom. There was a line there. Clear. Defined. I respected that more than I expected to. A soft knock sounded at the entrance, and the woman who had given me the clothes appeared briefly to say that a guest had arrived at the gate asking to speak with me. My stomach tightened. I did not need to ask who it was. The timing was predictable. Daniel had never tolerated being ignored. Adrian did not react with surprise. He simply looked at me, waiting. He will not come inside without your consent, he said calmly. This is your decision. I closed my eyes for one steady breath. I imagined stepping outside and seeing Daniel standing there in the same tailored suit, face tight, with controlled anger masked as concern. I imagined the speech he would deliver about public perception, about how tonight had gone too far, about how we could fix this privately. For the first time, I also imagined not shrinking when he spoke. I opened my eyes. I will speak to him, I said, but not as his wife. Adrian inclined his head once. As who, then? The answer came without hesitation. As myself. The word felt unfamiliar and powerful all at once. Adrian stepped aside, giving me space to walk toward the front of the house. Not leading, not guiding, allowing. As I moved down the hallway, my pulse quickened, but not from fear. From anticipation. This was no longer about rain or humiliation. It was about clarity, about seeing the dynamic for what it truly was. I paused at the door, steadying my breathing. Behind me, Adrian's presence remained constant, not intrusive, simply there. A silent assurance that I would not be left standing alone in a storm again. The door opened, and the night air slipped in, cool and sharp. Daniel stood beneath the porch light, tension visible in the set of his jaw. He began to speak the moment he saw me. Claire, what are you doing? I met his eyes without lowering mine. For once, I did not rush to explain. I did not apologize. I did not shrink. Choosing, I said calmly. And I meant it. Daniel had always been good with tone. Calm when he needed to be, wounded when it benefited him, sharp only when the doors were closed. Under the porch light, he chose wounded. Choosing what, Claire? He asked, running a hand through his damp hair as if he had rushed here out of concern instead of control. His suit jacket was unbuttoned, tie slightly loosened, the image of a husband inconvenienced by misunderstanding. You walked out in the middle of an event that mattered to me. I held the doorframe lightly, grounding myself in the cool wood beneath my fingers. You drove away, I corrected quietly. He exhaled through his nose, already frustrated that I was not following the script. You embarrassed me in front of investors, he said. You contradicted me. There it was. Not worry. Not relief that I was safe. Reputation. I glanced back once, just briefly. Adrian stood several feet behind me inside the house, not looming, not interrupting, simply present. Daniel's eyes flicked past my shoulder and sharpened when he recognized him. The shift was immediate. Calculation replaced irritation. I see, Daniel said slowly. So this is what this is. I felt the old reflex rising, the urge to defend myself, to clarify, to explain that nothing inappropriate had happened, that I had simply been cold and stranded. I let that reflex pass. This is me refusing to be spoken to like I am a liability, I said evenly. The air between us tightened. Daniel straightened slightly, adjusting his posture as if stepping into a negotiation. You are overreacting, he replied. I was under pressure. These contracts are complex. You know how much is at stake. Do I? I asked softly. Because tonight I learned that what is at stake may not be what you told me. His expression flickered, just for a second. Doubt. Then composure returned. Do not let outside influences confuse you, he said, his voice lowering. You and I built this together. Built. The word echoed strangely in my ears. I thought about the dinners I hosted, the contacts I introduced him to, the silent support I provided while he polished his public image. I also thought about the moments he minimized my opinions, the subtle corrections, the reminders that his name carried more weight. "We built a version of you," I said calmly. "Not of us." The porch light cast sharp shadows across his face, revealing tension he was trying to hide. "You are making a mistake," he warned quietly. "Walking away now will cost you." The words landed differently than they once would have. "Cost you." As if I were an investment. As if my value was tied to proximity. I felt no surge of fear. Only clarity. "Respect is not supposed to cost me," I replied. "It is supposed to be mutual." Daniel's gaze drifted again toward Adrian, measuring, calculating what influence stood behind me. "Is he threatening you?" he asked suddenly, seizing on a new angle. "No," I said immediately. "He is not." That was the truth. No coercion. No pressure. Just presence. Daniel's jaw tightened. "You think he will protect you from consequences?" I stepped fully onto the porch now, closing the door behind me, so Adrian remained inside, giving us space. "I think I will protect myself," I answered steadily. The difference was not lost on him. For a long moment we stood there in silence, the earlier storm reduced to a fine mist in the air. I saw the realization dawn slowly in his eyes. This was not a tantrum. This was not a temporary rebellion. Something fundamental had shifted. "What are you saying?" he asked finally, the edge in his voice softer now, almost uncertain. I held his gaze without flinching. "I am saying I am done negotiating my worth." The words felt solid, real. Behind me, through the glass, I could sense Adrian's steady presence, not interfering, not directing. Just there. And for the first time in a very long time, I did not feel like someone's extension. I felt like my own. Daniel looked at me as if I had spoken in a language he did not recognize. For years he had known exactly which tone would pull me back into alignment. Concern, disappointment, strategic silence. Tonight none of them worked. The fine mist in the air clung to his hair and darkened the shoulders of his suit, but he did not seem to notice. He was too focused on recalculating. "You are being dramatic," he said finally, lowering his voice as if gentleness would sound reasonable. "We had a disagreement. That is normal. Walking out like this is not." I let the quiet stretch between us. Normal. The word felt almost ironic. It had been normal for me to edit myself before speaking. Normal to laugh when I was corrected. Normal to apologize for having opinions. I had accepted that version of normal for so long that I forgot there were other options. "Leaving someone standing alone in the rain is not normal either," I replied evenly. He exhaled sharply, frustration breaking through the polished exterior. "You are twisting this." His eyes shifted again toward the house behind me, toward the shadowed figure he knew was inside. "This is not about dignity. This is about influence." There it was again. The assumption that power was always transactional. That I must have traded one alliance for another. "You think I stepped into that car because I wanted leverage?" I asked quietly. "I stepped into that car because you drove away." The truth of it seemed to land harder than accusation would have. For a moment he had no answer. The silence grew heavier. "Come home," he said at last, the command softened but unmistakable. "We will handle this privately. Tomorrow will be difficult enough without gossip. Tomorrow." Contracts postponed. Emails sent. Cracks forming beneath the image he curated so carefully. I saw the fear there now, tucked beneath irritation. Not fear of losing me. Fear of losing position. "You are worried about perception," I said. "I am worried about respect." He ran a hand down his face, impatience slipping. "Respect is earned, Claire." The words echoed in my ears. Earned. As if marriage were an audition. As if partnership were conditional. "And what did you earn tonight?" I asked calmly. His jaw tightened. He did not like being questioned. Not publicly. Not privately. Not at all. "I earned pressure," he snapped. "I earned responsibility. I earned expectations you would not understand." I let that settle, then shook my head once. "I understand responsibility. I just do not understand why it only seems to apply to you." The porch light flickered slightly in the damp air. Inside the house, I could sense Adrian's steady stillness, not intervening, not signaling, just allowing this moment to unfold without interference. That absence of pressure was louder than any defense he could have offered. Daniel followed my gaze briefly and then looked back at me, something colder sliding into place. "If you walk away from this marriage," he said carefully, "do not expect the same life." There it was. The final card. security, comfort, status, the things he believed defined my worth. I felt a strange calm wash over me. The house behind me was warm, yes, protected, but that was not what steadied me. It was the realization that my life had already been shrinking inside the comfort he promised. I do not want the same life, I said quietly. I want one where I do not have to earn basic decency. The words did not tremble. They did not break. They stood firm between us. Daniel searched my face, perhaps looking for hesitation, for the familiar flicker of doubt he could exploit. He did not find it. The mist thickened slightly, catching in the light. For a moment neither of us moved. Then something shifted in his posture. Not defeat. Recognition. He understood that this was no longer a conversation he could steer. "You are serious," he said, almost to himself. "Yes," I answered. And in that single word, I felt the final thread of fear loosen its grip. Daniel held my gaze for a long moment after I said yes, as if he were waiting for the tremor that used to follow my defiance. It did not come. The mist settled heavier on his shoulders, and for the first time since he arrived, he looked less like a polished executive and more like a man who had miscalculated. "You are letting pride ruin something stable," he said quietly. Pride. The word almost made me smile. For years I had mistaken endurance for maturity. Tonight he mistook clarity for ego. "Stability without respect is not stable," I replied. My voice sounded different to my own ears. Not louder, just anchored. He shifted his weight, glancing briefly at the closed door behind me. "Is he telling you what to say?" The question came sharper now, edged with something close to accusation. I shook my head once. "No one is telling me anything." That was the point. That was the difference. Daniel took a step closer, lowering his voice as if intimacy could restore control. "Claire, you are upset. I understand that. I should not have driven off like that." "Fine. I admit it. I was frustrated. But this reaction is disproportionate." I studied his face carefully, searching for sincerity. I found strategy instead. An admission calculated to regain footing, not to acknowledge harm. "You are apologizing because you feel consequences," I said gently. "Not because you feel regret." The words landed between us like something fragile and irreversible. His expression hardened. "You think you understand my motives?" he asked. "I understand patterns," I answered. "And I am done participating in this one." The porch light hummed faintly above us. Inside the house, beyond the glass, Adrian remained still, neither approaching nor retreating. His restraint said more than any interference could have. Daniel straightened again, the vulnerable tone slipping away. "If you walk away now," he said, his voice cool and controlled, "do not expect me to make this easy." The implication was clear. Legal complexity, social pressure, reputation. I felt the old anxiety attempt to rise, the familiar fear of disruption. Then I remembered the rain. I remembered standing alone while he drove away without hesitation. Easy had never been part of that moment. "I am not looking for easy," I said quietly. "I am looking for honest." He exhaled sharply, a humorless sound. "Honest does not build empires." I held his gaze without flinching. Maybe that is the problem. The silence stretched again, heavier now, final. Daniel's phone buzzed in his pocket, and he glanced down instinctively. I saw the flicker in his eyes when he read whatever message had just arrived. Something had shifted elsewhere tonight. Something beyond this porch. He looked back at me, tension visible beneath the composure. "You have no idea what you are stepping into," he said. I considered that carefully. He was right about one thing. I did not know exactly what tomorrow would look like. The legal conversations, the practical separation, the fallout among friends who preferred comfort over truth. But uncertainty no longer felt like a threat. It felt like space. "For the first time," I said slowly, "that does not scare me." His jaw tightened once more. He searched my face for hesitation and found none. Whatever leverage he believed he held was slipping, not because another man stood behind me, but because I had stepped out from in front of him. Finally, Daniel nodded once, short and restrained. "Then you have made your choice." I met his eyes steadily. "Yes." The word did not echo. It settled. He turned without another argument, walking back toward the gate, his silhouette fading into the damp night. I watched until he disappeared beyond the iron bars. Only then did I exhale fully. When I opened the door behind me and stepped back inside, the warmth did not feel like rescue. It felt like transition. And for the first time, I was not being led through it. I was walking on my own. When I closed the door behind me, the latch clicked with a softness that felt louder than any argument. The house was warm, steady, untouched by the tension that had just unfolded outside. Adrian stood where I had left him, near the center of the room, not pacing, not questioning, waiting. His eyes moved to my face immediately, reading the outcome before I spoke. "He is gone," I said. My voice did not tremble. It did not rush. It simply existed. Adrian gave a single nod, not in approval, but in acknowledgement. "And you?" he asked quietly. It was not about Daniel. It was about me. I exhaled slowly, becoming aware of how upright I was standing, how my shoulders were no longer curved inward. "I am still here," I replied. The corner of his mouth shifted slightly, almost a smile. Good. He did not ask for details. He did not demand to know what was said. That restraint felt deliberate, almost respectful. I walked back toward the fireplace, extending my hands toward the remaining warmth. My pulse was steady now, not racing. There was an unfamiliar calm inside me, not because the situation was resolved, but because it had finally been faced. "He will not let this go quietly," I said after a moment. Adrian moved closer, stopping a measured distance away. "Few men do," he answered evenly, "especially when control slips." There was no triumph in his tone, no hunger for conflict, only observation. I studied his profile in the firelight, the sharp line of his jaw, the stillness in his posture. "You could make this easier," I said softly. It was not a request. It was a recognition of his reach. Adrian's gaze shifted to mine, steady and unflinching. "I could," he admitted, "but it would not belong to you." The weight of that statement settled deeply. If he dismantled Daniel's world now, it would be his victory, not mine. I nodded slowly. "Then do not." The words felt strong, intentional. Adrian held my gaze for a long moment, as if measuring whether I understood the consequences. Then he inclined his head once. "As you wish." No argument. No persuasion. Just acceptance. My phone vibrated lightly on the table again. A message preview flashed across the screen. "Daniel." The wording was different this time. "We will discuss this with attorneys." Practical. Cold. I stared at it without reacting. "He is shifting strategies," I murmured. Adrian glanced at the screen, but did not reach for it. "That is predictable." I picked up the phone and turned it off completely, placing it back down with deliberate care. The silence that followed felt cleaner. "You understand this will change your position," Adrian said quietly. "Socially, financially, publicly." I nodded. "It already has." There was no fear in my voice now, only awareness. I had spent years aligning myself with a structure that required my silence to function. Walking away would dismantle comfort, yes, but it would also dismantle the expectation that I remained small. Adrian stepped closer, close enough that I could see the faint reflection of firelight in his gray eyes. "You are not afraid," he observed. I considered that honestly. "I am," I admitted, "but not of him." The distinction mattered. I was afraid of change, of unknown mornings, of legal documents and conversations with family who would not understand. But I was no longer afraid of being alone in a storm. Adrian's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "Fear is not weakness," he said. "It is information." I let that settle inside me. For years, fear had dictated my silence. Tonight, it was guiding my boundary. I moved toward the window once more, looking out at the dark street beyond the gate. The rain had stopped completely now. The pavement gleamed under the streetlights, washed clean. "What happens now?" I asked quietly. Adrian stood beside me, not touching, not crowding. "Now," he said calmly, "you begin building something that does not require you to disappear." The words lingered in the quiet room. Not a promise of rescue, not a declaration of possession, an invitation to stand fully visible. And for the first time in my life, that felt like more than enough. Morning arrived without drama. No thunder, no confrontation, just pale light filtering through tall windows and the unfamiliar stillness of a house that did not expect anything from me. I woke on a guest bed wrapped in clean white sheets, disoriented for half a second before the memory of the night before settled gently into place. I had not gone back. That fact sat in my chest like a quiet truth. I dressed in the clothes provided and walked downstairs, the scent of coffee drifting through the air. Adrian stood at the kitchen island in a crisp white shirt, sleeves rolled neatly, reading something on his tablet. He looked up as I entered, not surprised, not assessing. Present. Good morning, Claire, he said calmly. The normalcy of it startled me more than any dramatic gesture would have. Good morning, I replied, my voice steady. There was no tension in the room. No unspoken expectation. Just space. A mug waited for me beside the coffee maker, untouched. I poured some and leaned lightly against the counter, noticing how my hands did not shake. My phone, still powered off, sat where I had left it the night before. I reached for it and hesitated. You do not have to turn it on yet, Adrian said quietly, not looking up from the screen. The world can wait a few minutes. I studied him, aware that most men in his position would want updates, control, information. He did not. He gave me time. I powered the phone on anyway. The screen flooded with notifications. Messages from Daniel. Emails from mutual friends. A voicemail from my mother asking if everything was all right. I inhaled slowly and opened the most recent email first. It was from the same colleague as the night before. Further review required. Meetings postponed indefinitely. Language careful. Corporate. Final. I felt the weight of it, but not panic. Something larger than me was shifting in Daniel's world. And I had not lifted a finger. You did not intervene, I said softly. Adrian set the tablet down and met my gaze. I said I would not. His voice held no pride. Only consistency. I believed him. Whatever was unraveling in Daniel's professional life had been there long before I stepped onto that porch. I had simply stopped standing in front of it. My phone buzzed with a new message. Daniel again. We need to discuss logistics. No anger now. Just efficiency. I typed a brief response. We will speak through counsel. My finger hovered over the screen before pressing send. The finality of it did not sting. It clarified. Adrian watched me without interruption. You are certain? He asked, not as a challenge, but as a confirmation. I looked around the room, at the sunlight touching polished wood, at the quiet strength in the man standing across from me, and then inward at the steadiness I felt in my own chest. Yes, I answered. The word felt lighter this time. Not heavy with confrontation. Simply true. I set my phone down again and met his eyes directly. I am not here because I need protection, I said carefully. I am here because I chose not to go back. Adrian's expression did not shift into possession or triumph. It softened, just slightly. That distinction matters, he replied. To both of us. The honesty of that settled into the room. There were no promises exchanged. No dramatic declarations. Just two people standing in clear understanding. Outside, the city moved as it always did. Cars passed beyond the gate. The world did not stop because I changed my life. And somehow that felt reassuring. Change did not require spectacle. It required decision. I took a slow sip of coffee and realized something unexpected. The fear that had once dictated my silence was no longer steering my future. It was simply a memory. And as the morning light grew brighter across the floor, I understood that I was not being rescued from a storm. I had walked out of one. Change does not announce itself with applause. It settles in the quiet spaces after the decision has been made. By noon the house felt less like a refuge and more like a crossroads. I stood near the tall windows with my phone in my hand, reading through messages from friends who had already heard fragments of the story. Concern disguised as curiosity. Questions framed as support. I answered only what was necessary. I did not defend myself. I did not justify. I simply stated that I had chosen to separate. The word separation felt clinical, almost detached, but it carried weight. Adrian remained at the dining table reviewing documents, giving me space without withdrawing his presence. The balance was deliberate. There will be noise, he said quietly without looking up. People prefer narratives that keep their own lives comfortable. I understood what he meant. It is easier to believe a woman overreacted than to question the structure she left behind. I turned from the window and faced him fully. I am not interested in winning a public argument, I said. I am interested in not shrinking again. His eyes lifted then, steady and intent. Then you must build something that does not depend on their approval. The truth of that landed deep. 4 years I had aligned myself with Daniel's ambitions. Charity boards, networking dinners, appearances that reinforced his image. Somewhere along the way, I had quietly set aside my own plans. The consulting project I wanted to launch. The mentorship program I had drafted but never pursued because it did not align with his schedule. I felt a spark of something I had not felt in a long time. Ownership. I have ideas, I said slowly. Adrian leaned back slightly, giving me his full attention. Then begin, he replied. No offer to fund it. No immediate solution. Just confidence that I could. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a call from my mother. I answered. Her voice carried concern, confusion, and a layer of social anxiety. Claire, people are talking, she said gently. Are you certain this is wise? I stepped into the hallway for privacy, but kept my tone calm. I am certain it is necessary, I answered. There was a pause on the other end. Then a softer question. Are you safe? I glanced back toward the dining room where Adrian sat, composed and unintrusive. Yes, I said honestly. I am safe. After I ended the call, I returned to the main room feeling lighter. The conversation had not broken me. It had clarified me. Adrian stood as I approached. You do not need to stay here, he said quietly. You are free to leave at any time. The reminder did not push me away. It anchored me further. I know, I replied. And I did. That knowledge changed everything. I walked toward the door leading out to the small courtyard behind the house. The sky was clear now, sunlight reflecting off the stone path still damp from last night's storm. I stepped outside and inhaled deeply. The air felt sharp and clean. Adrian followed but stopped at the threshold, giving me space to stand alone in the light. What are you thinking? He asked. I looked back at him, not as someone seeking permission, but as someone sharing clarity. I am thinking that I spent years trying to be chosen, I said, when I should have been choosing. He held my gaze steadily. And now, I allowed myself a small, steady smile. Now I am. The courtyard felt open, expansive, even though it was enclosed by tall stone walls. Freedom does not require endless space. It requires decision. As I stood there in the quiet afternoon light, I understood something with complete certainty. This was not about leaving a man. It was about returning to myself. And that was a choice I would not undo. The afternoon light shifted slowly across the courtyard stones, stretching shadows into long, quiet lines, and I realized how different silence feels when it is chosen instead of imposed. I stood there for a long moment after speaking, letting the weight of my own words settle into something solid. I am choosing. The sentence echoed inside me like a vow I had never been taught to make. Behind me, Adrian stepped fully into the courtyard, not to close the distance, but to stand beside it. There was something powerful about that restraint. He did not reach for my hand. He did not frame the moment as his victory. He simply shared the space. You understand this will not be easy, he said quietly. It was not a warning. It was respect. I nodded once. Easy was never the standard I should have used. The breeze carried the faint scent of wet stone and early autumn air. For the first time in years, I felt the future not as a corridor narrowing in front of me, but as an open field I had not yet explored. There would be lawyers, conversations, public explanations shaped carefully. There would be nights when doubt tried to return, whispering about comfort and familiarity. But doubt no longer felt like authority. It felt like an old habit losing its grip. My phone buzzed again in my hand. A final message from Daniel. I will send the documents. No emotion, no persuasion, just process. I read it once, and then placed the phone in my pocket without responding. There was nothing left to negotiate. Adrian studied my expression carefully, searching perhaps for regret. He did not find it. You are certain, he said again, softer this time. I met his eyes directly. Yes. The word no longer carried tension. It carried peace. He inclined his head slightly, a gesture that felt less like approval and more like recognition. Then you move forward, he replied. There was no dramatic promise of protection, no claim, just an understanding that if I stayed, it would be because I wanted to. If I left, it would be because I chose to. That freedom changed the air between us. I stepped closer, closing the space on my own terms, not to lean on him, but to stand aligned. You did not rescue me, I said quietly. You gave me shelter until I remembered how to stand. His gaze softened in a way that did not weaken him. You were standing long before I arrived, he answered. The honesty in that felt more intimate than any grand declaration could have been. I looked up at the sky, now clear and bright, remembering the cold sting of rain on my skin the night before. I had believed then that I was being abandoned. In truth, I had been confronted with a choice. Remain in a life where I was tolerated, or step into uncertainty and claim dignity. I chose dignity. The city beyond the walls continued its rhythm, unaware that anything monumental had shifted. But inside me, everything had. I turned toward the house, toward whatever came next, Aware that this path would demand strength I had only just begun to recognize in myself. Adrian followed at an even pace, not ahead, not behind. And as I crossed the threshold into the next chapter of my life, I understood something simple and undeniable. He did not rule my future. I did. And this time, no one would leave me standing in the rain.